I just want to go back to the Tax Justice Network paper. In that paper or that report, they suggest a number of things that could be followed up. One is to support the OECD's action plan on base erosion and profit shifting. Is that something that the ATO agrees with?
Senator, we're an active participant in helping the working parties and the OECD work through that action plan. What action Australia takes in that is a decision for the government at the end of the day.
But you're participating in that?
Yes, we're active participants.
Active participants, and have you got anything to report on that, on what you've been doing on that in the working groups?
I mean, we've been, I guess in a sense one thing to report is the fact that the Commissioner's not here today because he's at the FTA helping work with other Commissioners with a joint understanding about those action items and what they might mean from an administrator's point of view. We've been very active in pursuing cooperative arrangements between revenue authorities. In fact, work that we've done, which I referred to earlier tonight, with 5 other revenue authorities to help understand business models that are used by various e-commerce companies, was a breakthrough approach to cooperation between revenue authorities, and we're looking to continue those approaches in respect of other aspects of international taxation where we could usefully cooperate more closely with our other authorities. We've talked earlier tonight about the automatic exchange of information, and certainly we've had a hand in helping understand what the implications might be in a practical sense for moving forward with the adoption of the automatic exchange standard. We've been an active player in the working group looking at country-by-country reporting and transparency proposals around documentation for transfer pricing. Indeed, we've been an active player, without going through all of them, because you'll recall there are 15 action plans, and if you break them all down, there's a series of working parties, and we have been a participant in pretty much all of those working parties and providing our contribution from the insights that we get from where we sit in the system.
So I guess, and another one I'd like to ask about is the feasibility of legislating to require Australian corporations to disclose all foreign subsidiaries in their financial statements.
That's not an issue that I've particularly turned my mind to. I'm not even that close to what the current obligations are to report in financials. ASIC would be closer to that at the moment than I would be. So
the tax office hasn't looked at the feasibility of that happening?
Well, we have been working closely with ASIC in terms of the accounting reporting that they receive. That's a matter that we're interested in because we can see the benefit of there being financial reporting to the greatest extent possible. That's information that can be helpful from a broader perspective. Greater transparency is generally a good thing from our perspective, and we'll continue to have that dialogue with ASIC.
So when you talk about ASIC, is the tax office given free access to ASIC's database so that it can obtain the audited financial reports of Australian companies that are owned by multinationals as and when required?
Yes, Senator, that's my understanding, yes.
That is available. And are you aware of any systematic accounting irregularities in the audited financial reports of large Australian proprietary companies? For example, failure to comply with accounting standards, failure to lodge accounts on time, and accounts that are missing altogether. And I would refer you to Glencore, Tom Waterhouse, Hancock Prospecting, for example. All of those have been reported in some of those capacities.
Look, I'm not close enough to give a definitive answer on that, Senator. Perhaps be wisest to take that on notice.
Oh, if you would take that on notice, that would be good. And in terms of these financial reporting practices of large proprietary companies, what work is the tax office doing to really crack down and clean up the regulatory activities and make sure they're actually complying?
Sorry, their obligations to report financial information, which is
And
part of...
yeah, because at the moment there's a suggestion that they're pretty slap happy in terms
Sure.
of their financial reporting practices.
So that's
But I think, sorry, if I may, I think that there's a distinction between the reporting that they're required to do in terms of financial disclosure for ASIC purposes and the amount of information that we're able to obtain under our powers, which is much greater. So that won't be in the public domain necessarily, but we have great powers to be able to access all of that information anyway.
Yes, so I'm asking, that's why I was asking about if you've got those powers and you're accessing that information about systematic accounting irregularities. that
No,
are
sorry,
turning
not
up.
about, I was talking about the information in relation to tax-related things such as subsidiaries overseas and so on.
Okay, so
But in terms of financial accounting irregularities, that is a matter for ASIC rather than for the tax office.
Right, and you haven't had any engagement with them about noticing any of that, or that's up to their compliance
Well, we have,
procedures, etc.
we do have good relationships with ASIC, but I would have to take that one on notice.
It's Shane Reardon, Acting Second Commissioner. We, as Second Commissioner Mills said, that's something for ASIC, but we are working closely with ASIC in terms of your earlier question, Senator, about access to financial accounts, which I think they're useful for us to look at as part of our information gathering, as part of our understanding of the way large corporates report, structured, etc. And that, as Second Commissioner Mills said, we've got a good relationship and that work's progressing.
Okay, because when I talked to ASIC earlier today about the reporting of subsidiary of the requirement of them to report on overseas, the ASIC's basically been giving them a get-out-of-jail-free card.
Sure. As Second Commissioner Mills said, on an individual taxpayer basis, we can ask for information, including access to their structures and their subsidiaries, etc., and they'll be obliged to supply that to us, and they do.
Okay, can I go to facilitation payments? Can you tell me how much have Australian companies, as a big picture figure, claimed as tax deductions under sections 2552(4) and 2652(5) of the Income Tax Assessment Act during the last 5 years? Do you have that information?
have to take
Well,
that on
first of all, tell me how you define a facilitation payment.
Facilitation payments are very broadly defined in those sections. In fact, the second one you referred to is a disallowing it. It's not an entitlement to a claim, it actually prevents a claim. So it's very broadly defined. It would catch almost any range of payments that are made to effectively get preferential treatment, what you would otherwise describe as a bribe in colloquial terms, if I can put it like that. But it's an extremely broad definition.
Okay, and so are you capturing that in the records?
Shane, do you have?
So we'd have to take that on notice to see what the actual amounts are and whether we've captured that information.
Yes, because in other countries they have legislation to publish what you pay, so they require that in their public reporting as opposed to their tax records, etc. In the last 5 years, has the Tax Office audited any Australian company to verify facilitation payments claimed as a tax deduction?
We'd have to take that on notice, Senator.
Does the Tax Office provide specific resources for scrutinising facilitation payments? And if so, do you have how many full-time equivalents do you have on that?
We wouldn't allocate resources on such a specific basis. We allocate according to risk. If facilitation payments presented as a particular risky issue with a particular corporation or group, then we would look at that issue, and our officers are trained to look at a whole range of issues and would certainly be able to deal with this particular issue that we're talking about.
Is it common? Do many of them claim their facilitation fees?
Sorry, I don't have any information on the incidence of it here, Senator. We'll have to take that on notice.
Can you tell me, has anyone actually had a look at the rate at which Australian companies, actually the number of them, is it systemic that they're paying facilitation fees and the kind of quantum?
I'd love to be helpful. I just haven't got anything that gives me any indication of what data we collect and what analysis we can do from that data. So I'm happy to take that on notice, Senator.
Part of the problem will be, Senator, some companies do self-assess, And so if they're following the law in terms of making their self-assessment, when they lodge their tax return, they're disallowing it themselves in many cases. So they will, as long as they've treated it properly, they're already not claiming the deduction that they're not entitled to.
Yeah.
So whether or not any specific audit action or similar would pick up that, any further amounts, we'll have to take that on notice, as my colleagues have said.
And has the tax office ever requested additional resources to scrutinise facilitation payments?
No, Senator.
Is there a reason for that?
I can recall pretty much most of the bids that we've done in the last little while, and we haven't specifically targeted resources for facilitation payments.
Well, given the number of resource companies operating here and around the world, and facilitation fees are commonly paid, ought that not to be something the tax office has a look at?
Well, as I said before, Senator, it's something we may well look at. I'm sorry I don't have data here that gives us that indication, but our teams would be well qualified to look at that as part of a whole range of things they might look at in a company audit.
Okay, so I just want to go to the tax amnesty that you have offered. How many individuals have taken up the tax amnesty offered since it opened in March?
Senator, from memory, I think it's about 800 individuals have taken up now. 840.
Okay, and have we got an aggregate sum of the revenue as a result?
I understand it's about 170 million.
So it's about, I can take it's 140 million in income and over 900 million in assets have been disclosed to us to date.
And can you tell me the lowest and the highest individual sums that were stored offshore?
Deputy Commissioner Cranston might have some information.
Michael Cranston, Deputy Commissioner, Private Groups and High Wealth Individuals. The actual largest disclosure has been about $50 million in income and about 150 million in assets.
And the lowest, yeah?
And the lowest could potentially be
Yeah, sure.
$10 and...
Yeah, right. Okay, and, so obviously that's a very substantial one. Have we got any notion of the average?
The average, well, I think the greater majority probably could be sort of at that smaller end. I can get you some figures.
Yes.
There has been, but there's one thing I'll say that when we've actually looked at some of the disclosures and we classify taxpayers according to what we understand about their wealth, that about 35% of them what we would consider to be wealthy Australians.
35%, so high is that? Okay.
Why is that?
All right, well, thank you for that. And so when you told me 840, were they high wealth individuals because I'm coming to companies, or have you mixed it all up? Or were you just referring to high wealth individuals just then?
I was talking about wealthy Australians, which is Australians with net assets wealth of 5 million
sure.
or more. High wealth is 30 million. Yep.
Okay, and sorry, we'll go back then. So go through the categories.
Oh, as I said, there's probably there's 11% of high wealth individuals.
Yep.
Of the disclosures, there's 24% of wealthy Australians.
Okay.
And 65% of other individuals.
Okay. And so in terms of companies and corporations that have taken up the tax amnesty,
It's
all just individuals?
individuals.
Okay.
There may be some companies which are linked to individuals,
But
they can, generally it's individuals, yeah.
Okay, right. And finally, the company tax cut. What is your net estimate of the impact on revenue in the forward estimates of a 1.5% tax cut?
That's not for the tax office, that's for Mr. Afra. And it's not, we actually haven't separately identified it.
Yeah, the proposed 1.5 point tax cut has not yet been a measure included in the budget or in my EFO.
It's a decision taken but not yet announced. It's not separately identified, and we've gone through this grant when we last met in the budget estimates. when we had a discussion in the context of the paid parental leave scheme as well. So the paid parental leave scheme expense is in the contingency reserve, and the revenue implications, the related revenue implications dealing with the company tax cut and the temporary paid parental leave levy are essentially reflected in...
They're factored into the revenue estimates, but the separate amount hasn't yet been identified and wouldn't be in the budget papers until such time as the government makes the formal decision to proceed.
Okay, and so the same obviously then applies of the impact on GDP, etc.
Yes.
It's a question for macroeconomics, but in principle,
In principle, yes, that's right.
Okay. All right, okay.